So I'm not going to share a lot of details because the details I have shared in this church, but whenever I've shared what happened, and of course, as I said in that video, I many times was in St. Anne's church and blessed by Father Leo's ministry. But one particular service I was in where the Lord really showed me some beautiful things. And he showed me two different things. He taught me something about prayer and in that service. And then he showed me in a very interesting way that I'm not going to talk about specifically because I don't want to get it off on that, but to pay attention to this person, Father Leo. And so that's why I knew God had a plan. I thought maybe it was going to be in this area, and turns out it's been in this area a lot. But I knew wherever he was going to go, God's hand was on him. And that's why I got so excited when Trish mentioned that she knew him well and that he might come and share with us. So, Father Leo, we're welcoming you to Selwyn Outreach Center. Let's give him a great big God bless you, great big Selwyn Outreach.
Good evening to everybody. Good evening. Good to be here. Good to be invited to come here. As Pastor Brian has said, we have a history together, crossing paths back and forth. And when Pastor Brian phoned me, I said, well, Pastor Brian, how long do you want me to talk? And he said, well, it's pretty well open-ended. Talk as long as you want to. I said, there's something doesn't compute here, because on Sunday mornings in the Catholic Church, I only get 10 minutes. So Pastor Brian, I want to tell you, boy, I'm free and easy here tonight. and it is, to the glory of God, as we see the sign behind us. And the other thing I want to say, if our music ministry is still here, if we want to double our wages, I would hire them anytime, Pastor.
Shame on you.
See what happens, you bring a Catholic priest in somewhere, he wants to steal something. but it's interesting. I marked on May the 31st, I marked 65 years of ministry. And it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey, and I think I'll hit some of the highlights tonight. Sort of the ones that kind of, from within, drove me, inspired me, moved me, energized me, whatever you want to call it. And I think the first place where I have to start, and when I go back to when I was a little kid, about probably 10 years old, we had a stand of tall pines. And I remember as a little kid of 10, I went to that stand of tall pines, gathered up branches, made a little lean-to, and there was a little creek went by, gurgling creek. The chipmunks used to come out, the birds in the trees singing, and the whispering of the wind in the tall pines. And I used to go and sit there by the hour. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. I just knew that somehow I was going to do it. Felt good. Felt like the right thing to do, to go there. And it was only many years later in my life I realized what a pivotal experience that was for me. Because I really feel it went on for about probably 4 years. Before my brother, he looked at it one day. He owned the farm. He looked at it, and a developer came along, and the developer looked at it. What he saw was houses, and what my brother saw was green, and he sold the pines. Down they went. And I remember I said to him, I'm really angry at you for carrying down my pines, because my prayer corner went with it. But that was when I look back, I had no words around, I have no idea. I didn't know anything about God. I didn't have a clue that there was something spiritual about it. And yet, I know now that God grasped me there. God grasped me there in that unknowing. And it's really helped me to appreciate that sense of not knowing. Because Because when you don't know, then you have to go with the flow of the Spirit. So I look at that as a really pivotal point in my life, just for the fact that I know. Now I know. I knew many years later, I realized that God grasped me. Because later on I did, surprisingly, like a lot of people, I become a teenager. And some of you may remember your teenage years. And I know the church I went to when I was a teenager, it was a church that always preached morality. And all I get on Sunday, then I knew all the rules I'd broken. It's like the lady who took a parcel to the post office and said, I want to mail this parcel to my friend in Florida. And the postmistress asked her, is there anything in the parcel that can break? And she said, no, only the 10 Commandments. So I felt every Sunday I was breaking the 10 Commandments. But it really left you with a sense of, this God is not a very attractive God, a judge God, a punitive God, an authoritarian God, a rule God. And as a teenager, I remember the pastor used to teach about people who are always chasing pleasure. Well, as a teenager, I chased pleasure. I enjoyed life. And I felt I was a bad guy. And I lived with that for many years. After 4 years of high school, I went to Toronto and lived with my sister and her husband. And I got a job. But the thing that in my mind was, more than anything else, I wanted a career where I could make a lot of money. Because after all, if you got a lot of money, you can buy anything you want, right? I thought. That was my illusion. Okay. But that was my dream. But when I was a kid, the one thing we did every night, we got down on our knees and we said evening prayers. So even though I didn't know very little about God, I thought that, well, I might as well keep praying. And then the second year, about January, something started to move inside me. Because I still had my dream of a career and money and all that money could buy. And it started to move inside here, a little tiny voice. And I would turn it off. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear what it was saying, because it was saying, you're being called. I didn't want to hear that. I had my own idea of what I wanted to do with my life. And the last thing I wanted to do with my life was to spend it doing religion. I had no appeal to me at all as a young man. So I listened to it, and slowly but surely, it wore me down. It wore me down. And after, I say, 6 months of it, I decided, well, the only way I can get silent to that voice is to give in. And so I made a deal with God. I said, God, I'll make a deal with you. I'll go to seminary for 2 years. Then after 2 years, I'll leave and get out there and do what I want to do. That was my deal. Well, when I came tonight, there's a favorite poet of mine. And Pastor Brian, you probably know him. He's known as Francis Thompson. And the poem is The Hound of Heaven. You know that? And I live that. The Hound of Heaven. Now, Francis Thompson wrote this poem because he was running away from God. And that rang a bell with me, running away from God. Keep running, and maybe God won't catch up. Francis Thompson thought that. I fled him down the nights and down the days. I fled him down the arches of the years. I fled him down the labyrinth ways of my own mind, and in the midst of tears, I hid from him under running laughter. And faith to him, their fickleness to me. Francis Thompson. And then I came to understand Francis Thompson when I really thought of my own running away from God, because I didn't want any part of spending my time doing religion. Because like I said, my heart was set on that illusion of money and the good life that would buy. My illusion. And there's a poem about that. I think it's Simon and Garfunkel or Joni Mitchell that sang that song. The illusions of life. Yeah. The illusions. And that was my big illusion. So I went to the seminary for a couple, and then after 2 or 3 years in the seminary, I forgot about it because I was there, and I finished off and I was ordained. And the next pivotal point in my life in this journey of ministry took place on the first Sunday when I presided at my first Mass in the little church out in Norwood, where I came from. And there's that time, it used to be in Latin, and the old Catholics here, you probably remember those days. Catholics used to come to Mass, and the priest would be saying things in Latin. Most of the people would be praying the rosary. But anyway, what were you going to do when you didn't understand what was going on? You had to do something since you took the trouble to go there. But anyway, there was that silent moment, and inside me I heard a voice saying to me, Leo, I want you to put people first. Well, I'm a young man, and I had no idea what I was getting into. So I said, sure, why not? Why not? I didn't know what the future held. It wasn't very long before I got into ministry. I found out for sure what that words meant. Put people first. It's sad to say, but I entered into ministry in a church which had become very legalistic. And it was a dichotomy for me because when I read the Gospels, Jesus raged against the legalism of his day. He raged against it. And I found myself in the same situation, raging against legalism. And meeting people who experienced that legalistic. When they went to get a baby baptized and they weren't going to church, no, won't baptize your baby, you don't go to church. Or a Catholic would show up with the Protestant, oh, we don't marry you people. Some of you are not in your head, you know all about it. But so I ran into that, and it just tore my heart out. Like, what's going on here? This is not of God. This is not of God, in my humble opinion. Putting God first. And what I see happening was kind of an evolution in my life where I came out and was really dedicated to the service of the institution. I found myself moving away. But in moving away from the institution, I was moving closer to the Spirit and God and following the Spirit. And when I was in the seminary, we used to study canon law. And I eventually became a joke because I always got up in the high 90s on the exams in canon law. And as one of my friends once said to me, no wonder you got so high marks. You know what ones to break when you get out of there. So that was part of it. So I think what really came out of it was that part of it of evolving in your own faith life and a relationship with God and being guided by the Spirit in some mild way. And I think, Brian, when you and I crossed paths in the South End over at the Sacred Heart, I thought I was a bit of an athlete anyway, played a lot of hockey and softball. And so the Recreation Committee called me and said, we hear you like sports, come on. So I volunteered and working for the city. And that was really the education for me. Because now I had to mix with people of all different religions, no religions, different ways of looking at life, but really good people. Really, really good people who really cared about the city in which we lived. And their dedication really reinforced for me the notion of commitment, of looking after people, of being willing to put your gifts and talents at the service of other people. And that's one of the big lessons I learned from all the people who work in and out of City Hall. It really was a learning lesson for me. The other one which really captured me, as well as that voice that said, put people first. The second one is Matthew 25. And you know it well. Jesus said, I was hungry, I was thirsty, naked, in prison, sick. You visit. And what you did to others, you do to me. And that has been one of the most driving forces in my life. That I tried to live that scripture as fully as I possibly could. And it did involve me. Involved me not only in ministry within the church, but involved me and moved me to look outside the church for the various ways I could minister to people. And as Pastor Brian said, with Trish over here and Dan, we started PATH. And PATH is very busy working at providing sleeping cabins for the homeless. And I spent a lot of time with the homeless to get to know them, because the only thing I could really offer them was friendship, love and care. And there was a learning experience, and I went first to be with the homeless. I still remember the day, because after all, you probably know, unfortunately, the homeless don't have an opportunity for a shower every morning, or every week, or every month, or maybe once a year. And I still remember I was really hesitant, because I like to be really clean. You know, I like my shower every morning and to be clean. I like to be around clean people. And I was down there, and I remember the lady walked up one day, and I could smell her coming, and she was not dressed well. And she came up, put out her arms, and I think, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I said, well, I guess I'll let it happen. And she gave me a hug and a kiss. And I gave her a hug back. But to me, that was a big healing for me. Because I went through that wall once, I was able to go through it many times. But she helped to take that wall of fear down that was inside me, which made her another rather than one with me. And that too was an impact. So in many ways, I think that, I remember I used to have an elderly lady, a parishioner, used to come to the church on Saturday, and we'd just sit in the pew and shoot the breeze. And she said to me one day, she said, you know, Father, a bishop can make you a priest in 20 minutes. But, and it's always what comes after the but, right? She says, but if you're coachable, the people can make you a pastor in 20 years. And I really saw the wisdom of that woman. She was one of the wise women in the parish. And it really taught me a lot to realize that in ministry, I had to be coachable. Learn from the people. Listen to the people. Respond to the people. And not be right. Because after all, when you're ordained a Catholic priest, you're right. You know everything. Think you do. But it really taught me, no, it's not being right. It's being compassionate. It's caring. It's journeying with people. It's building relationships. And that's what I was taught by people who taught me so much.